Hi and welcome. This is Nancy Sheads and I'm back today with another Inspire Me Monday Copic coloring video for Power Poppy. This time I'm featuring the Go Wild stamp set by Power Poppy. The image that I'm coloring today shows a fresh picked bouquet consisting of a single rose, a scented geranium, coreopsis, and basil sitting in a variety of jars on a windowsill. The set includes 3 vignettes as shown, as well as a variety of birthday-related sentiments. I've linked below all the supplies used in this video. When I first started coloring, I watched a lot of videos, and to be honest, I was pretty frustrated by them. The videos were sped up so much that it was hard to follow anything technique-wise, or they were so heavily edited that you didn't see any mistakes. Learning to color is a process, and sometimes it's helpful to see the stops and starts, the do-overs, and the decisions made along the way to the end result. So today I'm showing you a first attempt at coloring this image so that you see the process, warts and all. The video is slightly sped up, 1 1/4 times rather than the 2 to 3 times often used to shorten the overall video time, but not so fast that you can't see what's happening. You'll see that I used a lot of markers as I kept experimenting to get the colors and depth and saturation that I wanted. If I were teaching this stamp set in a class, I would have colored it several times as part of the planning process, so my students would get a pared-down marker list rather than one reflecting all of the experimentation. Out of consideration for my students, I try to limit the number of markers required for class, so I end up repeating the same color combinations from class to class, so that my students don't have to buy so many markers in order to participate. This is how I color when I'm not worried about turning a project into a class. When left to my own devices, I'll just grab several BV markers to help add depth, or layer multiple light BG, B, BV, and even RV markers in backgrounds to help pop areas forward and push others back. I'm comfortable with my markers thanks to hours of practice, but I also remind my students that I'm not teaching a paint-by-number class. I want them to learn how to adjust and refine their own coloring rather than just blindly following the teacher. So here's this week's video, warts and all. Sometimes I get a little carried away with flicking, causing the camera to shake. And sometimes I realize I missed an area and I have to go back and add color. Sometimes I just have to pause and think about where I'm going and how I'm going to get there. Some things I do just because it works for me. And that's hard to explain to students why I do what I do. The reality is that in the moment, it seemed like the right thing, and represents a flow of creativity born from not overthinking the process and not worrying about blending groups or perfect technique. I tell my students that teachers teach what works best for them, so the way I blend may be different from what another Copic instructor advocates. Sometimes I work dark to light and light to dark in the same image. Sometimes I base coat the area with the lightest color to saturate paper, and other times I jump right in with the darkest marker. It all depends on what paper I'm using, how full my markers are, and how much time I have to color, or even my mood. It's all a process. So in the meantime, while I've been babbling about process, you've been watching me color the glass in the windows. I go back and forth between the light shades of B, BG, and BV to add layers of sheer color to the glass and deepen it enough to push forward the flowers on the windowsill. I also added pale warm gray to the wall, and I used the W0 marker to help fade that color to white. I used W1 and various BV markers for the area under the windowsill to try to visually push the wall back and the ledge forward. I'm also using W1 to emphasize the detail in the sash and casing of the windows. I'm still trying to visually push the window back and pull the flowers forward to add some dimension. So here I've moved on to the leaves, and I'm base coating all of the leaves with G40. As many of you know, I'm a frustrated watercolorist, so I had decided that the effect that I was going to try and get with these leaves was a little looser and a little bit more like a watercolor would be. So I have that light base coat. I've moved on to G43 to add to the center of the leaves to try and get that look of the leaf having a fold to it or a bend to it, that V shape for the leaf. And then I will be adding just a little bit of G46 to try and push that effect a little bit further. I'm just trying to go for something soft and delicate and, as I said, kind of a watercolory look. Now these leaves are small. Actually, the whole image is small, so you're not going to get much in the way of detail here. So that's why I'm just aiming for something loose that gives the impression of the shadows. Now I've moved on to the Coreopsis, and again, small flowers, no room for much detail, so I'm just putting in a base coat of Y32. I came back with Y35 with the idea that I could try and push the center of that flower down a bit by just going around the middle of the leaves. And there wasn't enough contrast, so I tried using a little R20, a little bit of red, to make that a little bit more orange. Still not really happy with it, but I decided to let it go. Now, here's a mistake. I'm not entirely sure why I decided to make the centers green. It's probably because it's the markers that were in front of me. If I had this to do over again, I wouldn't have made them green, especially those two flowers where I'm not really coloring the center. So here I'm starting with a base coat on the rose. I started with the R000 because I wanted to keep this light and sheer looking to go along with the other colors. A little bit of R20, and I had decided that that wasn't quite enough either, so I added in a little bit of R32, is what you see right now. And then I added a little bit of Y32. The combination makes that area just a little bit orange where the stamen are sticking up. From here I've moved on to the basil, and I'm using BV01 to color in the flowers. Obviously no detail there at all. And from there I went on to the leaves, and I used the same color combination that I used for the geranium in the very beginning. And if I had this to do over again, I probably should have picked a different green combination, maybe the G20s instead of the G40s. Otherwise, all the leaves look a little bit alike. But I colored them the same way, a base coat of the G40, followed by the G43 down the center, leaving some of that G40 along the edge showing, and then followed by G46 down the center. Again, it makes the leaves look the same as those on the basil, so I think if I had this to do again, I would have picked a different color combination. I still wasn't happy with the Coreopsis, so I tried one more time with Y38, which deepened the petals but didn't add much contrast. Now the petals are kind of all the same color. I'm not sure whether I've made a mistake at this point or just I had the wrong expectations of what this would do. I moved back to the stems and I added a layer of G40 to all of the stems. And then I decided that the area of the stem that's above the water would probably be a little bit darker, so I added in some G43. Now I'm finally down to coloring the bottles. I used the same colors as the window glass, B quad, BG quad, and BG10. I kept layering the colors, working back and forth, because I assumed that whatever color was coming through the windows would also come through the bottles. I worked primarily through the middle of the bottle, leaving some white along each side as a reflection. I didn't really think about it until after I had started coloring the bottles, but I probably would have had an easier time if I had used different colors, because essentially I've created clear bottles in front of clear window glass, so it's hard to differentiate between the two. And here I just keep trying to add more color and trying to deepen the curve in the bottle and maybe even deepen the water a little bit more. My other problem is in trying to make the letters stand out on the bottle. I added some BV 00, but probably should gone a little darker. The other solution overall would be to go back over different areas with color pencils to help deepen shadows or apply color to small areas. And here's another experiment. I decided to add W0, which was the color I used in the window sash. I assumed that warm gray color would show through the bottle. It also helped desaturate the bottle. And now I'm back to fussing with the window glass, still trying to differentiate between clear bottles and clear window glass. So what's happening now is just pure experimentation. And here I'm going to start coloring the scarf. I decided to go ahead and make it yellow. I've started with the Y32 as a base coat, working around all those little leaves as well that are on the scarf. I decided to make the leaves green, so I picked the medium tone. And then I went back with Y35 to try and create some folds. Now this too was probably a mistake. I should have used one of the BV markers underneath that yellow to try and create those folds to give a little bit more definition. And here, because you can never fuss with the bottles enough apparently, I've added more BV. But that's the BV that I should have used on that scarf. So that pretty much wraps up the coloring. Again, this was just something I did spontaneously. I just turned on the camera, colored, and kept the final edits to a minimum so that you could see the process. The end result is pretty and certainly suitable for incorporating into a card. Even if it hadn't, that would have been okay too. I learned a lot about coloring this image just by allowing myself to experiment, allowing myself to make mistakes, and to learn from them. Thanks for watching. See you next time.